We can start? Can we start? What do you think? Or
yes, we can start. Thanks, Chiara. Thanks, Chiara.
Okay, thank you to everybody. Welcome, and let's start this very interesting training. Thank you to be here, to all of you. Please, Sabrina.
Welcome, everybody, to our second ENTRAIN Train the Trainer session, which focuses on economics, financing, and funding of renewable district heating. Although I'm sorry that we can't meet each other in person, it's also very cool, and I'm really, really happy that we have some external stakeholders with us. And I really welcome our stakeholders from Germany, Poland, and Italy to our training. My name is Sabrina Metz, and I work for AIE, the Institute for Sustainable Technologies. And within ENTRAIN, we are the work package leaders of the work package knowledge transfer. Before I go more in detail concerning the content of the training, I want to give you some technical information. Just for information, this session will be recorded and it might be released afterwards too, of course, only if we get the okay from all of the speakers. I ask you to please mute your camera during the event and mute your microphone during the event, and also switch off your camera. That's especially good if you have problems with the connection, with your internet connections. And if you have any questions, please ask them via the chat. And we will direct them to the speaker at the end of the presentation or the session. And if we have enough time, of course, we will also be able to do some discussions and speaking. After my introduction, the first presentation we will have will be from my colleague Harald Schrammel. He will present the profitability calculation tool we have just translated into English. Then Heidrun Kögler from the Energy Agency of Styria and Carles Vivas-Dugoras, one of my colleagues, will present the heat cost comparison. After a short coffee break, I know it's only 10 minutes, but I ask you to please be back in time because we just have a short amount of time. Solitas, Patrick Geiger, and Joachim Zacher from the region of Neckar-Alp will tell you something about economic feasibility of bioenergy villages and solar thermal plants. After that, Heidrun Kögler from the Energy Agency of Styria and also our project partners will tell you something about funding of renewable district heating in the ENTRAIN regions. After the next coffee break, we are very happy that Siegfried Eigner from Eigner Energy Contracting will be with us. He is a very experienced planner and he will tell us something about the financing and operating model, renewable heat contracting. And after a summary, we will come to an end at 1 o'clock. I want to go a little bit more in detail concerning the content. We already had our first Train the Trainer session last November. And in the first Train the Trainer sessions, we really took a look at the first steps, which are very important for renewable district heating, especially the pre-feasibility study, because it's important to know if it's possible to create a district heating plant in a certain area. For example, if there is enough heat demand in this area. Now, as a second step, we move to economics, financing, and funding, because the operator or the investor needs to know if it's also profitable to build a district heating plant there. And so we will give an overview of the economic profitability calculation and take a look at an example and also at the sensitivity to heat prices, fuel costs, and investment. Then our partners from Germany will give us examples from Germany with solar thermal and bioenergy villages. And also the heat cost comparison can be already very important for the operator, because he might need to know if he can compete with his heat costs in a specific area, if the heat prices are attractive to the customers compared to their individual heating systems they might already have installed. And as a possible financing and operating model, we will tell you about renewable heat contracting. These are some questions. I just want to repeat the most important one. So now after this training, we want to know if the district heating system is economic profitable in an area and how we can calculate this. If the system can be competitive with its specific heat costs, and what are possibilities for investment. Our target audience for the trainings are, on one hand, potential drivers, operators, and investors, because as already know, they want to, as I've already told you, they really want to know if it's economic profitable to have a district heating plant. They also want to maybe present a heat cost comparison to the customers, to the future customers. And they're also very interested in financing models and in funding, but also local communities like municipalities, customers, and local authorities can be very interested, for example, in funding. What are the benefits of funding? Sorry. But they also, for them, it's also very interesting how high the heat costs are for the people living in this area. And it might be interesting for a local community to be an operator for themselves, but before they have to know if it's reasonable and if they can afford it. And also energy agencies might be very interested to have an overview of heating costs and to be able to present that to the broader public. We will start now with the first presentation. Harald Schrammel, my colleague.
Welcome.
Presentation of economic feasibility, and he's also the project leader of the Austrian quality management system, QM Heizwerke.
Okay. All right, everybody. Thanks, Sabrina, for the introduction. It's my task to tell you something about economic feasibility calculation of biomass district heating plants. Therefore, quality management program in Austria provided a tool which we will discuss and I try to explain you. To the content of my presentation, I think first of all I want to tell you some words about economic feasibility. What's the aim about this calculation? What should be considered? Then I will introduce you the tool by showing you an example calculation of a real project in Austria. For the same project, we will do sensitivity analysis, a very important part of every economic calculation, and then we will have some conclusions. First of all, what's the aim of economic calculations? We want to have a comprehensive economic assessment of our district heating projects. We need to know if it is economically feasible, if these investments are safe, or what risks we do have. Of course, we will have rough estimations during pre-feasibilities, but these estimations are not enough. This is not an economic assessment of the project. So with every project stage, we should go into more detail, and before having a final investment decision, we should have a detailed calculation analysis of this project, and then having updates during every project phase, during the planning and every project phase. This is the basis for the investment decision, and I said that already. And when you do an economic calculation, an economic assessment, you have to ask yourself in the very beginning, what do I expect from my economic performance? Do I have to meet a certain payback period? And ROE, do my company requires a special interest rate for the invested capital, for example? So these are some KPIs, and you have to decide what you want to have. In case of cooperatives, like a fuel supplier cooperative, cooperation of farmers, forest industry, the perspective may change. So the perspective may not be a profit-oriented one, but the fuel price perspective. So what fuel price do I get out of such a project? Because they do not live off the profit of this project, but of the fuel price. The same applies with heat consumer cooperatives. They might not be profit oriented, but they want to, of course, have competitive or low heat prices. So then the perspective changes a little bit. If we consider just a standard company perspective, we might have, let's say, define a certain payback period. Then the result of such an economic calculation is a heat price, because we can, of course, vary the heat price until we meet this payback period. And then we have to check, is this heat price we get out of such a calculation, is that competitive compared to other heat supply systems? We will have later on another presentation regarding that, so how to do a heat cost comparison. But the heat price you get out of such an economic calculation is the basis for that heat cost comparison. Furthermore, there are some things you really should consider and you should not forget. First of all, what is the scope of delivery? What are the things I have to invest? What are others investing? Which costs do I have to consider in my calculation? For example, biomass logistics. You can build your own biomass storage, wood chip storage, which you have to invest, or you have another other form of biomass logistics, so that you have an external storage, which you do not have to invest, but maybe then you get some higher fuel costs. So think about that. So which costs do I have to take into account? Which costs are investments? Which costs are running costs? Try not to have costs in twice. That could be an issue. Rent or ownership could be an issue, especially for land, for vehicles. The heat transfer substation is the interface to our consumers, but who is owning it? We have both models in Austria, for example. There might be different models in different countries. So in Austria, sometimes consumers own the substation, sometimes the operators own the substation. That clearly influences our economic calculation. They care what you put into the investments for the substations. The same applies with business models. There could be different business models, so that heating plant and network are not owned by the same company. Of course, then you have your calculation will change. Do not forget to calculate planning costs. That's a common error, that we think about investments, but we do not think about costs for planning. The quality management QM Heizwerke, and I personally strongly suggest to involve an experienced planner. Do not save at planning costs. Don't try to do it on your own if you're not very experienced on that. So consider planning costs. Furthermore, consider costs for permits, for certificates. Eventually, you might have to pay for easements. So for the allowance to bury pipes on foreign land could be an issue. Think if all investments are eligible for subsidies, because our calculation tool considers subsidies as well. So we can define a certain subsidy rate, but they care some things might not be eligible for these subsidies. Reliable input, I think it's very clear, leads to reliable output. So if you do a lot of assumptions, estimations at the input side, you may have a lot of uncertainties on the output side. So take care of that. I will come back to that point later on. I will show you what that means exactly when we see this example. And the same applies with the sensitivity of economic calculations. You will see that very soon. There, in Austria we say, or in German we say, there are a lot of screws you can drive in order to change a result. This especially applies with economic calculations. So it's very easy to trigger the result you wish to have. But nevertheless, it might not be very serious. So be very critical and never trust the salesman. Now we come to our economic feasibility tool. This is a tool doing a dynamic economic calculation. This considers the time of the payments, the time of the revenues. So it's not the same if you have high payments in the beginning or high payments after 10 years. That clearly influences the results. We consider price adjustments, we consider indexations, interest calculation, of course. We can consider heat sale development, we can consider reinvestments. I will show you how that works. We have included a calculation of heat prices. There are different options, different price models. We will come back to that later. It's not directly linked to the input side, but there is an indication and you then choose what you take as an input for your calculation. We have some potential improvements which are not part of the tool yet. For example, heat generation costs cost calculation according to and German standards. That's the Association of German Engineers, and they suggest a very good calculation leading to heat generation costs. It's not a dynamic calculation, but it's a good indicator. So we are thinking of including that into the tool. So maybe an updated version will have that. The same applies for automated sensitivity analysis. I will show you later on what that is. We can do it manually at the moment, but maybe we include an option so that you get automated results on sensitivity analysis. Of course, we can include additional economic KPIs. We are not economists, we are not experts, so the results we have now are fine. They are proven and checked by experts, but of course there are other KPIs we can include. Nevertheless, you can try to include that yourself, so that the tool is open source, you can adjust it, but please be carefully doing that. This can lead to errors, so carefully check what you do. If you change anything. As I mentioned, the tool was checked by experts. However, we assume no liability or guarantee on that. So you have to check it yourself. Are the results feasible? Are the results clearly related to the inputs, or is there any errors in the calculation? Of course, you can use other tools. There are other calculation tools as well. You can set up your own calculation. So that's not rocket science, but that's just the service we can offer. And during the ENTRAIN project, we will do translation of these tools from English into national countries in Polish, Croatian, Italian, and Slovenian, if I'm right. Okay. A quick summary of the input data. I think we can do that quite fast because I will show you later on in the Excel tool in detail. Of course, we need an annual heat demand or a heat sale. That's our basic revenue of a biomass district heating system. We need the efficiencies of the boiler and the district heating grid because that's defining our fuel consumption. And of course, we need a lot of economic data from whole investment costs for the whole plant, fuel prices, running costs, personnel costs, maintenance, rent, other costs, insurances, subsidies. I mentioned that we have to set some options regarding the financing, the loan conditions, for example, and of course a heat price. These are screenshots, that's what it looks like, but this is just for information I show you later on in the Excel tool. For the output, you get annual results of a detailed breakdown of disbursements in payments for every year. You get a net present value and even a graph of that. You get an overview of operating costs for 1 year, status of your loan balance, and the cumulative disbursements and in payments, so a cash flow calculation. This is, I'm not sure if you see my cursor, maybe I'll change it to here. So you get an output diagram with showing some of these results here. I will be going into detail later on. And at the same time, you see all results in a summary table. Additional outputs are an overview of the operating costs. I mentioned that you see the revenues of, in our example, we just have revenues from heat sale, but it is possible to consider additional revenues, additional subsidies, like not a lump sum payment, but an ongoing subsidy, for example, and to get an overview of net present value calculation. Okay, we have prepared an example. This is based on a real plant which was commissioned in 2017 in Styria. It's a 2 biomass boiler plant with a total nominal capacity of 1,500 kilowatts. So we can say medium-sized plant for Austria. We have a 35 cubic meter storage tank. We have a fuel storage for loose wood chips. This is based, I think it was an existing building which was adjusted for storing wood chips. So they had to build a new roof and something, so they saved some investment costs there, as far as I know. We have a district heating network with a trench length of 4,500 meters. Supply temperatures are shown here as well. We have 56 consumers and a total heat sale of more than 4,000 megawatt hours per year. And what we do usually do in such an economic calculation, that we consider the development of the heat sale. Usually, if you start up your plant, you will not have 100% of your plant heat sale. So this is shown here, that we start with about 70% and steadily increasing to 100%, which is then our plant heat sale. That's what we want to have. But at the same time, we know that supply areas are developing, that we have the possibility to densify our district heating networks, that additional heat consumers will potentially connect to the district heating system, depending on the supply area, of course. This is part of pre-feasibility study, which we have shown in the last training, that you have to do detailed analysis of your supply area in order to find out what sales potential you have there, and in what time you might get new consumers. What we did here is we assumed a certain increase of our heat sale, which is 3% per year, related to this 100% here. But we set the maximum at 116%. So this is no steadily increase over 25 years. I think that's not serious to calculate something like this. So there is an option in our tool to set a maximum limit, which is then the full expansion of the district heating network. In our case, reached in 2025. As I mentioned, these are all data from a real project in Austria. We derive this data from our quality management database, where every operator in Austria has to provide these data for the funding organizations in Austria, but the planners and others have access to that as well. We added up the investment costs of 2 construction stages. Stage 1 was building of the heating plant and the basic district heating network. And the second stage was an enlargement of the district heating network. We have considered all known investments and running costs. As mentioned, I cannot guarantee that there are some hidden costs which we are not aware of. However, we did not have to do many adjustments, assumptions. So this is real costs. This is the real cost structure of this plant. We did some minor adjustments regarding the heat price because they have some individual heat supply contracts, and we did some minor assumptions there. Otherwise, that's the real costs. Okay. I already mentioned the price calculation. We have a calculation sheet in our tool. What do you have to consider doing a price calculation? So you have to find out, how do I want to configure my price model? Do I want to charge for basic for the basic connection, just for the energy? Do I have a special metering charge? In Austria, it's very common to have all three of it. Sometimes they do not have metering charges. Usually the metering charge is not really relevant for the revenues, for the total revenues. That's a very small part of it, so some of them avoid doing it in order to make the model a bit easier. But usually always have a basic charge and then energy charge. The basic charge usually you can have as a lump sum per year or a lump sum per month. You can have it as a value in euro per kilowatt of connected load, or you have lump sums and you have maybe a price graduation for larger consumers. Do you want to have a general graduation of prices depending on consumer size? Do you want to have same prices for everybody? Do you want to have individually negotiated prices? Both is possible. Sometimes these models are overlapping, so that you have a published price list, for example, but still there is room for negotiation, especially for larger consumers, for industrial consumers, for example. That's what we have in that project example. So I think they have a basic price model, but then they do individual negotiations in order to sell their connections, of course. And a very important point, connection fees. Sometimes, or in Austria, in many cases, operators ask for a one-time connection fee in order to construct, to build the connection to the consumer. This depends a little bit on the ownership of the substation, of course. So if the operator owns the substation, they might ask for a higher connection fee. The other way around, of course, the connection fee is lower or not existent because the consumer has to invest into the district heating substation himself or herself. Okay. And one important point, we had that in the meeting yesterday a little bit, and my colleagues will discuss that later on. But you really have to take care if you compare prices and if you talk about prices. I already mentioned we have basic charge, energy, and metering charge. Do not only talk about the energy price. This is, of course, the running costs depending on your heat demand, but overall in total, you get a total revenue out of basic energy and metering charge for every consumer. And summing that up and dividing it by the total heat sale, you get an average heat price, which is a very good indicator in order to do heat cost comparisons, or to get a basic indication where we are. So that's why I defined that here. So we have the total revenues per consumer of basic metering and energy charge. You sum that up over every consumer and you get your total revenues in euros per year. And if you divide that by the total heat sale, you get an average heat price. So always take care, if you just have euros per megawatt hour, this could be an energy charge or an average heat price. Okay, that's it for the beginning. I don't know if there are any questions. We can have some short questions if it is possible. Otherwise, I will switch to the Excel tool. I have looked at Sabrina in the chat. Is there any questions? Or turn on your microphone and ask now if you want to.
There is one question, if we can send the link to the calculation tool from an external stakeholder.
Okay. We have online right at the moment is the German version of the calculation tool. We already have prepared an English version of this calculation tool, which is not published yet. And but all ENTRAIN partners got the English version of the tool already, so you can ask them, they can forward it to you. There might be some minor adjustments during the preparation of my presentation. I saw that there are some minor mistakes we can optimize, but they do not influence the calculation results. So the calculation is fine. It's just some additional plausibility checks we have to check again. At the same time, now we are on the way to translate all these tools, especially the economic calculation tool within the ENTRAIN project. So I think within autumn, there should be versions in national languages, as I mentioned, in Polish. So they are not published yet, but you can have a German or an English version right now. So if there are no more questions at the moment, I now try to switch to the expert tool. Okay, I hope you can see that. Yeah, looks fine. Maybe a few words to the basic structure of the tool. There's a README so that you have an idea where this comes from, who paid for it. So it was our national program, Klimaaktiv, allowing us to develop this tool, and of course the Interreg project ENTRAIN, funded by the European Union, allows us to translate that. If you have any questions, you can contact us. There are comprehensive explanatory notes, which we strongly recommend to read. We don't do that right now, so don't be afraid. But just to mention, take care what you do. There are explanatory notes, and consider them, please. Okay, then we have a basic input sheet. We have a results sheet. You see that here. And we have a calculation sheet for the heat price. I go into detail right now, just that you know. And we have just one side, one sheet allowing doing personal notes, comments on the option on the version you just saved here. So I strongly recommend to do a basic version and then do variations. We see that later on, do sensitivity analysis and save that as a different version of the tool, so that you have your base case and then different options. Okay. First of all, we have to define a heat saver. I try to mark that here so that you see where I am. We have an annual heat sale. This is the 100% value, which I have shown you before. You can define an internal heat consumption in case your power plant or your heating plant has an internal consumption where you did not get revenues for. So, or if you do, don't know, if you donate your heat for whatever, an NGO, you don't ask for a bill, you can consider that here, okay? These are heat consumption which you do not get revenues for. Of course, we need an annual efficiency of the biomass boilers, so of the total heating plant, and we need an annual efficiency of the district heating network. The 85% is okay, I think. It depends, of course, if you have a flue gas condensation unit. Okay. Sabrina just said that it is very small, so I zoom in a little bit. At the same time, you have your own zoom option in the GoToMeeting, so you can use that as well. If you move your cursor, there should be an option to zoom in for you personally as well. So I hope this is better now. Okay, so we have an annual efficiency of the biomass plant, and we have an annual efficiency of the district heating network. The 85% is a good value. Of course, this can be lower, so take care. But we assume a serious planning according to QM standards, and thus you should meet a certain standard of the efficiency. Of course, if you have a flue gas condensation unit, you might have much higher efficiency of this plant. Then you have to adjust this value. Okay. The efficiency of the district heating network, 91%, means 9% heat losses over the year. It's a very, very good value. It is possible. We have that for this plant. In Austria, they have very high insulation standards. They have low system temperatures, so it is possible. I will show you later on what happens if we change this value. This is what I mentioned before. Sorry, we have a certain development of our heat sale within the first couple of years. You have seen the graph of it. This is where we can define that. This is our 100% value related to this input here. And then we can define a certain annual increase of our heat demand. So we expect that within the first 5-6 years, we always can increase our heat sale. And as I mentioned, we set a maximum limit. So this is 116% of this value here. This is our maximum heat sale. This is our net heat sales price. This is the average price, which I told you before. Here we have to set the average price for our revenues. Always related to this heat sale here, or then the 160% of the heat sale. This is the value coming from the sheet heat price, which we see later on. For all costs we consider in the input, you can set annual price adjustments or annual adjustments of the development of the heat price. I think this is important. We have indexation on our price structures. Of course, prices will be higher in 10 years. We can consider that here. Take care with these values. You easily can influence your results with that value and try to be serious here or see what happens doing sensitivity analysis. These are the lump sum, so the total sum of the connection fees. I mentioned it before. This is what consumers pay in total. So the 56 consumers in total pay 350,000 for being connected to the district heating system. Any other incomes from fuel sale, for example, some biomass plants in Austria provide high quality wood chips, for example. They have prime units so that they may have some additional incomes. That this can be something else as well. Price adjustment. We need a project start just to get a timeline for our diagrams. There is no other influence on that. We set the fuel price. In that case, 22 euros per megawatt hour of fuel. We assume that we have 100% of heat production with biomass. We have a 2 boiler plant. This is possible. There is no other peak load option or emergency boiler in that plant. Price adjustment, so no fuel price for fossil fuels. We set a specific electric consumption. This is a standard value in Austria. Take care with that. If you have an electric precipitator, if you have a flue gas condensation unit, this is definitely higher. So take care of that. Electricity price, I think that is clear. and price adjustment. Then we come to other running costs. This is this part here. Personnel costs, in that case, quite low from my perspective. This is a cooperative of farmers. So they have one guy taking care of the plant, but not as a full-time. And they have other personnel doing that within their within the cooperative. So that's why we sometimes in Austria have quite low personnel costs for this plant, for our heating plants. We have some accounting costs. Okay, I don't have to go into detail in that. Maintenance costs, that's very important. Maybe a few words to the maintenance costs. You can set values. The Association of German Engineers, I mentioned it before, the VDI 2067 offers some guiding values on that as well. You can set 1 to 3% depending on the plant component. This may seem to be very high, but you have to consider that you may not have any maintenance costs within the first 1, 2, 3, 4 years, just very small or just a very small amount. But then over the years, you might have kind of reinvestments. You will need new pumps, you might need new conveyors, you have to do larger boiler services. So this is adding up. You consider it as an annual amount for the maintenance cost. But of course, the payment depends on the plant. So we will not have much payments in the first couple of years, but then you will have increased payments in case your plant gets older. Okay. Cost for rents, land, for example, I mentioned that already. And other costs, I think it's always good to consider some other running costs, which you definitely will have. You will have some insurances, some unplanned things, for example. These are our investment costs. And as you see here, we consider some costs not eligible for subsidies. In Austria, this is typically costs for land, costs for vehicles, costs for fossil-fueled backup boilers, for example, and some minor other things. In that case, we do not have investment costs for land because this is a rent, and this could be a vehicle. In that case, it's just a safety which we included as an assumption in this calculation. Okay. We need to define some things about the financing. So the loan period, interest rate, investment subsidies. This is according to the Austrian funding schemes. So we get up to 30% of investment, in some cases even a bit more, but just 30% of the eligible costs. So take care here. We often have some lag in the disbursement of the subsidy. So you usually in Austria, you do not get it in year one when your investment starts, but maybe after you have done all your investments. That clearly influences the economic performance, so take care of that. You may have to have an intermediate financing solution for these 5 years, which could be costly as well. Okay, in that case, we do not have ongoing subsidies, so annual subsidies or something like that. For the NPV calculation, we considered an imputed interest rate of 5%. This is an overview of some calculated values. I do not want to go into detail with that. This is just for information. And I jump to the results. Okay. Oh, I just started. I just have 10 minutes left, so I could be a bit faster. I'll try to give my best. But as you see, the results are quite comprehensive, so it's not easy to be too fast. You have an overview of the operating costs. This is related to 1 year and the 100% heat sale. This is more or less for information. These are the results and the basis for the NPV calculation. I will not go into detail with that. What you see down here is you get a simple graph showing the NPV for different periods. Of course, in the beginning it's negative, but at some point it should be turned into positive. So if you consider the whole period, it should be positive. Okay. Then you get these results table. This is the main table of all results. I think it does not make sense to go into detail. So every input is then calculated here and leads to a final cumulative payment. And this is shown in that graph. I hope you can see that. I'll try to make that a bit larger. What we see here, the most important line is this one, is the cumulative payments. And these payments turning around into the positive. This is our payback period here. So we have a payback period from 15 years, 16 years. This is reasonable from my perspective. For an industrial company, this might be ridiculous, I know. But we are talking about heat production plants, energy production plants. We have to consider longer payback periods. This is an infrastructure project, of course. So we think we have to consider that the pipes we bury will last for the next 50 years. So there's no point in reaching payback periods of 2 or 3 or 4 years. Okay, so this is the main output. Of course, you have additional outputs. You see the status of your payments, of your loan balance, and so on. What I wanted to show you is how the prices, how this calculation could be easily influenced, and what you additionally can do. What we have done here, we have defined an increase of the heat sale. But increase of heat sale means additional investments in my pipe infrastructure, in my network. You have to consider that as well. So we consider here 30 to 60,000 euros per year of additional investments. So you're free to use this here. You can even more consider reinvestments. For example, after 20 years, I need a new boiler, and they can at 500,000 euros here, you immediately see that in the result here. So that's a typical curve if you have reinvestments. I put that back. Additionally, you can add revenues here. For example, here we have an investment of 180,000 euros. For that investments here, we do not consider investment subsidies in an automated way. If you want to do so, you can add that here. For example, you get 50,000 one-time payment for that investments. In Austria, that is possible. Then you can consider that here. Or revenues from power production, whatever. This tool is not specially made for CHP plants. Okay, then we get our result here. As I said, 15 to 16 years of payback period we have here. You see, if I add 50,000 here, of course, this is improving. I already mentioned never trust an economic calculation. Take care and really look carefully about every value you have here. So it's very easy to change this, for example, just to 3% could be possible, of course, but look what happened. So we are then at 10 to 11 years of payback period, of course. So curve changes quickly. So we are very sensitive with these calculations. Okay, due to time reasons, I do not go into further details, and I switch back to my presentation. I'm not sure if we have enough time to go through everything now, but okay. Sorry, yeah, that's right. So I already mentioned there is a high sensitivity on certain parameters. That's why we say you have to do a parameter study, you have to do a sensitivity analysis. Everything else is not serious from my point of view, because all the time you will have uncertainties. You have to do some assumptions, estimations. You will get some offers for your investment costs, for the running costs, but still there are uncertainties. And of course, the situation may change over the years. And at the same time, you have to be aware what are the main influencing factors of my economic performance. So what you can do is you vary one input parameter at a time. First of all, don't vary everything, change 10 values, you don't see anything. Do one at a time and have a look what the result does, just as I have shown you before. Of course, later on, you can do a best case, worst case scenario, so that you, for yourself, define what is my worst case, and then all input parameters set to the worst case, see what happens, and then do the best case scenario. Somewhere in between should be your base case scenario. And try to find out what are my influence factors and be very sensitive on that during the planning and the construction phase. So it's not like, oh, I don't care if you have 10% higher investment costs. Take care and see what happens in your result. That's what I say, do it on a regular basis during your planning procedure. This is our base case scenario. We have seen that. I now show you very quickly some results of a sensitivity analysis. What we see here, we changed the subsidy rate from 30% to 15% and to 0. See what happens with the economic performance. That's why we have a lot of biomass district heating plants in Austria, because we have funding. If you have CO2 pricing, we don't need that funding anymore, but we don't have it. That's a pity at the moment, but hopefully we will have that in future. Net heat sales price, we had that. This is very, very sensitive. This is our base case, plus 10%, minus 10%. See what happens. This is the green. Green is the good side. Reddish, orange is the bad side. And really take care on the digits behind the comma. This is, as I said, I'm an experienced planner. I'm an experienced calculator. I know what to do in order to get you the result you want to have. So it's very easy to set this to 82 euro per megawatt hours. And it's always 1 year better, half a year better. So take care. Same with the annual heat sale. That's more or less the same value as the heat price. You see a high sensitivity. We have set the upper limit of the heat sale to 16%. This is not so sensitive if this is 18 or 14 or 20%. Okay, this is okayish, so this is not super critical. The biomass fuel price is one of our main cost drivers beside the investment costs. Of course, that is sensitive too. So that's what we mean with sensitivity analysis. With such a tool, it's very easy to do that. Save a new version of the calculation and just change the values a little bit and see what happens. And then you can compare it with the base case. Price adjustment, okay. I'm coming to my conclusions now. From my perspective, that could be different for other people, for other companies. From my perspective, these plans show a reasonable economic performance. You should never expect a cash cow with such a project. I haven't seen in all these years, well, maybe one or two, but not really cash cows. You might have good projects if you have an industrial heat supply, for example, with high heat demands year-round, very high full load operating hours. But don't expect cash costs. Then you should not invest in such a plant. We have high sensitivities. I think we discussed that already. This plant has built in Austria. I mentioned it. They have low personnel costs, so they have some good things, so that they got this economic performance. This is a plant built in a town with a natural gas grid. I have to mention that because that's not not so common, and we have discussed that yesterday, that this is really challenging if you have a natural gas grid as a competitor, and of course often it does not work out. In that case, they had a very good starting point. They had 8 microgrids in the region, so they were experienced already. They know how to deal with customers, how to sell heat and things like that, and they had 2 microgrids in the supply area, which they are now supplying with the new larger plant. So 2 of them are already integrated into the larger network. That helped, of course, as well a little bit. General conclusions: a comprehensive economic calculation is mandatory. So for every serious project development and planning, you have to do that. And you should do a comprehensive economic calculation, not just doing some simplified calculations, static cost-benefit evaluation, heat generation costs. You, of course, can do all that. You can do that during pre-feasibility, but never forget doing comprehensive analysis. And if you're not able to do so, ask an experienced planner to help you with that. For financing, it might be necessary anyway. Do updates in every project stage, and it must include sensitivity analysis from my point of view. I already mentioned it twice. Don't trust the calculation you didn't forge on your own. I know that, I have experience on that. So if your planner is not serious and want to have a planning contract, of course, he will be on the good side of your economic performance. The same applies with suppliers of boilers, for example, or others. I don't want to talk bad about them, but of course, they are not operating the plant. They are selling boilers. So take care of that. Sometimes, especially for CHP plants, you find economic calculations on websites, or they present it, they show you, and they always have, I don't know, payback periods of 5 years, 6 years. Super cool, but please calculate it yourself and prove that. And I mentioned it already, read the explanatory notes of the tool. We are here at your service if you have any further questions. I'm not sure if you have time now for it, but of course you can contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Harald, for giving us this interesting insight into economic profitability calculation, and also for pointing out how tricky it can be to do a reliable economic calculation. We will now try to at least answer some questions.
I see one question. The prices are excluding VAT, so we are always calculating without tax. Okay, and somebody says in Poland we haven't customers for heat yet. Okay, I'm not sure what that means, because in Poland you have district heating networks as well already, but maybe we can discuss that later. Okay, I think that's it so far. Are there any other questions? No. All right, I think then we move on.
Perfect, yeah. Perfect, now we move on to our next presentation, heat cost comparison, and it will be presented by Heidrun Kögler, who is from the Energy Agency of Styria, our Styrian project partner, and he also did a great job in organizing this training. And also, part of the presentation will also be presented by Carlos Rivas-Tugores from INTEC, who is also part of the QM translation team and who did a lot of work on the heat cost comparison tool. Now I give the stage, or let's say the monitor, to Heidrun Kögler.
Yeah, thank you, Sabrina, for the introduction. Please, Ricardo or Chiara, can you give me the moderator? Chiara, Ricardo. Okay. Sabrina will give me the moderator. Thank you. Okay.
Is it okay?
Yes, everything okay.
Okay.
You can see my presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Great. Sorry, my computer is a little bit slow. Just one moment. Okay. Okay, I will try it without presentation mode. Okay, so hello everybody. In the following 30 minutes, Carlos Rivas-Tugores from the IENTEC and me will talk about how to compare heating costs of different heating systems. For this reason, the IENTEC developed an Excel tool which provides an overview of average annual heating costs. And this tool is called Heat Cost Comparison. So what is the benefit of this tool? It helps us to compare the costs of heat supply with district heating systems on the one hand and individual heating systems on the other hand. There are some possible applications of the tool. First, the tool can be used as a first rough profitability calculation in the pre-planning stage of a district heating system. So looking at the prices of typical individual heating systems in your region, you can use them as target values for the heating tariff of your planned district heating system. And so you can see if you are competitive to other individual heating systems in this region. Furthermore, you can use the tool in the stage of selling to get customers, either for price comparisons in dialogues with individual customers by comparing the heating prices of the individual heating system with the heating tariffs of your district heating system, or also by presenting such example calculations, for example, at public information events with potential customers to point out the advantage to connecting to a district heating system. Now, what are the potential users of this tool? So it could be operators and planners. For planning a district heating system, the operator needs to know the price to be able to compete with the prices of individual heating systems. Also, regional energy agencies and consultants can use the tool to provide assistance to operators who are willing to realize a district heating system and to convince potential customers. And also customers themselves can benefit from the tool. With the help of this tool, a potential customer is able to see his or her advantage if connecting to a district heating system compared to an individual system. Now, how can we make this heat cost comparison? In the first step, the input or base data is collected and determined, such as fuel prices of different fuels, their net heating values, the heat demand of customers, and so on. In the second step, different heating systems are defined. All possible reference systems, the existing individual heating system of the potential customer, and the district heating system that should be promoted. Using the input data from step 1, the heating costs of the different heating systems are calculated here. And in the end, in the third step, those heating systems and their evaluated costs are compared to each other. And here is this, you can see the structure of the tool. In the first sheet, boundary conditions are fixed. In the second sheet, the existing heating system of a potential customer and its costs are defined. In the third sheet, the district heating system itself is defined. In the fourth sheet, all possible reference systems are defined. And finally, in the fifth sheet, the costs of the existing heating system, the district heating system, and all reference systems are compared to each other. I want to show now how all the sheets look like as a short overview. And later, Carlis will explain them more detailed by presenting an example. Okay, now it works. The first one is the boundary condition sheet. Here, technical and economic boundary conditions are to be defined. For each main fuel type, it is possible to specify the net heating value, the fuel price, and the average price development. Based on the introduced values, an average heating price for the next years is calculated. Also, two economic boundary conditions are defined here. This is the available capital for the investments and the loan interest rate. These values will be later used in the cost calculations of the different heating systems. In advance, we tried to collect the heating costs of our countries that are needed as inputs for this table. First, thanks a lot for sending the filled out preparation questionnaires with the different fuel prices. In this table, I tried to combine it to values with a consistent unit of euro per kilowatt hour to be able to compare them. You can see that there are still some contradictions that couldn't be cleared in advance in this short time, but I want to mention what's important to think about when providing the input prices for this tool. For example, it should be defined if the costs are with or without sales tax. Concerning wood as fuel, you always have to consider the type of wood and the water content and evaluate it correctly. And of course, filling in the heat prices here, you have to take care of using the right units. Also, in the case of gas or electricity as energy inputs, different tariffs have to be considered. In any case, you can see here that the fuel costs are quite different in the different countries, and it's very interesting to compare them to each other. The next sheet is the sheet of the existing heating system of the potential customer. It includes the necessary information to define the already existing heating system of a potential district heating customer. The aim of the first section on the left side is to obtain the annual heat demand and necessary heat capacity. You can see it here. Both are later used as base data also for the other reference heating systems. On the right table, economic parameters are defined, such as the necessary investment for the heating system, again the fuel costs from the boundary condition sheet, here as energy charge, and also other relevant costs. The next one is the sheet of the district heating system itself, which provides all information that is needed for comparing the existing heating system of the potential customer with the district heating supply. The annual heat demand and the heat capacity demand are the main technical parameters that are defined here. Also, the basic charge, the meter charge, and the energy charge are parameters that should be entered here and can be used to define and adapt the heat supply contract. In the next sheet, named reference systems, a set of 9 typical heating systems is defined. Parameters such as energy charge, available capital, annual heat demand, and heat capacity were already predefined in the former sheets. Other conditions such as installation lifetime and annual efficiency of the heat production unit are to be introduced here to be able to calculate the heating cost for each system as a result. And finally, in the result table, based on the introduced data of the former sheets, the annual heating costs of each heat supply technology can be calculated. You can see here the costs of the existing heating system, the costs of the district heating system, and the costs of the 9 reference heating systems. These are presented as the sum of the fixed costs here in green and the variable costs in orange. So now this is the end of my presentation, and now Carlos will present a short example and also explain the tool more detailed. Chiara, maybe I know I can do it too, but I want to give the moderator to Carlos now. Maybe Sabrina can help me.
Carlos Rivas, is that okay? Okay.
Okay, now
Right. I think I can now.
You can share your screen.
Yeah, you see the Excel tool?
Yeah. We can.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Well, I heard some background noise. Okay, thank you. Well, thank you, Hydrom, for this good overview of the tool. What I would like to mention before we go through the tool is some what I think relevant points for the tool itself and also for this presentation today. The first of all is that what we are doing here is a simplified calculation, so it's not a detailed calculation like the one Harald presented, where we have a detailed definition of all the costs within our system, but more of a approximate calculation where we make average cost and use a more simplified approach, kind of. And then another point is that as for every tool, here is also very important that the results we use, either results, the inputs we are putting are good and accurate, because the results will highly depend on the inputs we are defining. And another point what I find very important is that we need transparency for our tool, because we want our results to be trusted. So it's not enough to say, okay, we have a good input data, but you also need to show it, and a good way is to reference or to make it clear where these results are coming or where these inputs are coming from. Another point important for the presentation today is that the tool is under development. It's not finished. So I would ask you just not focus much about the quantitative results, but more about the tool, the methodology, and we can, of course, talk about it. And I'm happy if you have any comments or suggestions about the tool. Okay. So what we plan actually for the tool, as I say, is under development, is to have some minor adjustments on the tool structure, as well as the wording. And we plan also to include the new KPI, which are the CO2 emissions, which I think that's very important nowadays also to compare heating systems. And also the CO2 taxes. And also we started research to search information about different costs for different heating systems. So we are not finished yet. That's why I mentioned before, don't focus now on the quantitative results, because we still need to do some research on that to give trustful results. Good, then I can switch to the tool. Here, likewise, that the feasibility calculation from Harald, we have README where it will explain who pay for the tool and some exploratory notes that we need to be updated. And we like to now focus actually in the boundary conditions. Good. The boundary conditions we have here on the left to define different, or we can the possibility to define different fuels. We define now biomass, pellets, biomass wood look, natural gas, oil, some kind of typical fuels. And for us, what is really important is actually to have an average price for the next 20 years of this fuel. That's what we will use in our calculations. And we start by, for instance, defining a net heating value for this fuel type, which is given in kilowatt hours per proper unit. In this case, is kilogram, and some case will be cubic meter loose. And then a full price for a base year. The base year, it's a actual price. So probably you shouldn't take 2020 because it's a kind of weird year for everyone, also for the prices. Therefore, in this case, we are introducing data from 2019. And then with these two values, we can calculate the heat price for our base year. That's kind of our current price. And we are now, as I say, willing to calculate the heating cost for a period of time of 20 years. Therefore, we need an average price of our fuel price. So we have the possibility to also here define development of our fuel price, which is defining percentage a year. It means every year we apply 1% increase to our base price. And this is done for the next 20 years. And once we have all yearly prices, we can calculate our average. And that's what we do for every fuel or relevant fuel in our tool. As I mentioned before, it's important to have good values, but also explain where are these values coming from, because otherwise there will be also doubts, questions, and so on. And I think it's better to go directly straight. Okay, these are the fuel price we are taking into account, and we are actually looking at trustworthy references and so on. And I think it's a very important point in this, let's say, in this kind of calculation, where you want to approach someone with trying to sell heat from your district heating system and so on. And we have here already done it for some of our fields, but you will have to, of course, do it in your own country using your local prices, etc. Two other values we are defining in this sheet is the available capital, which is, let's say, how money you have at the beginning, and the money you can use to pay part or the whole investment, which means at the end we will reduce our investment to be financed by 4,000. So let's say something that you pay at the beginning and the rest it needs to be financed. The loan you take or you need will have a loan interest rate 3%. This is fixed. This is not changing every year. It just constant for all the, let's say, the loan period. maybe mention, just to make sure that, for instance, in the case of gas and electricity, it may be a bit of special case, because in these cases, gas and electricity is most likely will come from a grid. And just mention that we are talking here about the heat or energy price, kind of. It means the price for kilowatt hour that you are purchasing your energy, electricity, or cubic meters of liters of gas. And other costs that you might have, because you are connected to a grid, like similar to district heating, you will have probably basic charge and the metric charge. They have to be introduced later in the tool. If we go to the heating system, that's our potential customer. We will hopefully, or we need actually some information of our potential customer, and he has to supply it, for instance, which kind of heating system he has. Does he has oil, natural gas boiler, or which kind of system he has? Would be nice, of course, if he can give some information about the fuel consumption over a year. And then, of course, some information about the boiler itself, which is the annual efficiency or the kind of nominal power, nominal heat capacity of the boiler. In worst case, he will probably just give this information, some rough values, and we can later make some assumptions on these values. We just need to kind of try to be serious of what's happening there. We actually include here the definition of domestic hot water preparation, but we will skip this part because it's now in the current version of the tool is not used. The idea was that could be that some heating systems or the boiler is producing hot water for heating and also for this domestic hot water needs, and that the district heating system maybe just use it for one, not for domestic hot water, but just for heating and so on, and there could be some differences, but for simplicity we keep it okay. What we want to supply is exactly what the main boiler is producing, which means this 22,000 kilowatt hour per year, and we need also this power, and that's our boundary condition for all heating systems. And then what we have to define is our want to do economic calculation of our system. Therefore, we need to define a lifetime of our installation, so that we can know if the installation after 20 years, then we need to do some reinvestments. And this is defined actually for the, not for every component. It's kind of, you have to take into account the main components just to keep it simple, but at the same, it's a bit more complicated, no? Because you have to think a bit more about it. But anyway, you will have the possibility to define a basic, meter, and energy charge. In most cases, it's like if you have oil, probably you just have the energy charge, and you don't have any basic or meter charge. This is relevant, for instance, if you are connected, you have a gas boiler and you are connected to the grid, for instance, then you will have probably to include some values here. But otherwise, in general, you will have to define the energy charge. And even if we calculated here before for oil, we think that it's better just to keep it free, because it could be that this potential customer has his own contract with or his own supplier. Therefore, it's indicated here what we assume in our boundary conditions, but then we need to put actually here the real value the customer is paying now, kind of, or expect to pay in this as average in these 20 years.
Carlos, just for information, you have 5 minutes left for the presentation.
Good. No, I think I'm okay. Thank you. Good. And then to do the heat comparison, we need actually to take all the costs that occur for these 20 years for our heating system, and therefore we just not include our heating cost, but also our investments. Here we can define again investment, but for kind of the whole system, or you take it upon the main components. our assumption was first to discard these heat like radiators and so on, just focus on the heat production, let's say. But at the end, it's important just to be fair with all systems. So if in one you want to include the radiators and so on, you have to do it for all of them, and just try to be transparent and fair with all the systems. As I mentioned, we define what's our available capital, and then we can calculate how much we need to invest or how much should be our loan. We can define a loan period, and then also again some additional costs. Here, the idea is that we include some costs that are not annual costs. Could be like you have some safety checks on your boiler every 2 years, for instance, or could be that even just regular maintenance and so on. So what you need to do is just to average this cost for as a yearly cost, because what we define is euro per year, and this is applied to every year. Good. This definition here is actually very similar the way we define our reference systems. We define gas boilers, oil boilers, coal boilers, etc. And actually it's very similar. That's what we have here: basic meter charge, investment, some additional costs, and therefore I will not go into detail with this just because it's very similar. What we have here is we also define the fuel mix. This is not used now, this will be used later for the CO2 emissions calculations, but at the end it's the same. You need to define, you have kind of the same entries, and you need, of course, again to write down what are your assumptions and where these values come from, just to be clear, transparent, so you can follow what's going on in the calculation. And then we have here the district heating system. That's actually, or well, again, the fuel mix, that we don't need it yet. It's not just for the CO2 emissions. And what we need to define is mainly the basic meter charge. It's kind of which contract is my potential customer going to get. And that's some exemplary values, but that's kind of maybe a typical contract where you have a yearly payment as a basic charge, meter charge, and energy charge. And then what Harald mentioned is also relevant, is who is paying for the district heating connection. In this case, I didn't put any value, but this is something you could include here if the customer needs to pay for it. And with all these inputs we get, we can calculate how we get our results. What we do is to calculate actually the whole yearly cost as an average cost. It means we have, for instance, an investment where we need a loan. So it means we might pay a loan for the first 5 years. Afterwards, we don't pay any. But we sum up all the payments for the 20 years and get an average of this investment cost. We sum up all the costs for the energy, could be that we define as a energy charge, but also the other costs, this additional cost for maintenance, basic charge, metric charge, and so on. And we sum up all of them, and we have it here in this row. And that's our first KPI we can use to compare the systems. We have here a short breakdown. I won't go into detail, but the idea is just to have a bit more information or how is the share between the cost with its energy cost or investment and so on. And the other relevant KPI we are using to compare the heating system are the effective heat cost, which at the end is just kind of it's just the division of the yearly cost or this average value by the energy we are actually delivering, and that's here defined. And the last point we have is just a comparison of the different heating systems using the district heating as a reference. I mean, as 100%, and you see that in this case, the values we're using, and maybe one need to check it once again, but we'll see that the customer would benefit to connect to a district heating system. That's what we want. That's what we want to show. And that's what the tool is actually for, to give this overview of different heating systems and to have a clear overview of how the heating costs are in our regions, because we are using local input data, and it's a simple calculation, but if it's well used, it can be, I think, very helpful to our aim, which is this comparison. I think I'm finished. Yeah.
Thank you, Carlos.
Yeah, welcome.
And thank you, Heidrun, for your presentation about heat cost comparison. I don't know if there are any urgent questions. If yes, please write them down or just say something. Otherwise, we would move to the break now.
Just 10 minutes, no more. It's that
Yes, a 10-minute break.